Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Deborah DeBoer, Director of Special Projects here at NASBAR. I am delighted this morning to have a friend of mine and someone who I've had the pleasure to work with before, and someone that our leadership committee has worked with before and was found quite useful, the things she was talking about. So that's why I brought her here this morning. This is Catherine Johns. The name of your company, Catherine Johns?
Catherine Johns.
Catherine Johns. How smart that is. I am delighted you are here. And what I will say is, when we were doing leadership, at the end of our leadership, our 12 weeks of leadership, I asked all of the people who were in there to rank all the speakers. And I had some dandy speakers in that, to rank the speakers. You came out on top.
Love that.
What you had done was talk to them about how to do a presentation on Zoom. I remember us all sitting up straighter as you were talking to us that day.
Because Zoom was newish.
Zoom was new, and we were all afraid.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kevin, I know that you have an illustrious career that goes back a while. Well, both of us have careers that go back a while. But I know your name from when you were on the radio. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your career on the, what your career was, but how did you get to the radio? You know, people always want to know, how do I get to be famous, kind of thing.
Yeah, this is actually not a bad story. So I was a nursing major at Valparaiso University and pretty committed to the idea of being a nurse. There was a guy in my dorm that I kind of had a crush on, and he was interested in radio. So he said to me one day, you know, you have an amazing voice. I was like, really? I had never thought about my voice as an asset, ever. And then he wanted to go audition for a show on the campus radio station, and I went with him because of him, not because of radio. I didn't care about radio. I was going to be a nurse.
And you had a crush on him.
And I had a crush on him. And the bad news is they picked me and they didn't pick him, which kind of shot the possibilities. Although also he turned out to be gay. I didn't know. I'm not sure he knew that. You know, everybody was sort of exploring at that point. Anyway, the guy faded away, but radio turned out to be a lot of fun. And when they kicked me out of nursing, I thought, well, radio, I guess I'll do that. Deborah, I had no idea how challenging it would be. Mm-hmm. When I went to register for classes at Western Illinois University, the head of the broadcasting department told me there's no place for women in radio. Can you imagine? Like saying that to somebody out loud? It was a very different era. He was wrong. So I went on to a 25-year career in radio.
And what did you like most about it?
Not being seen.
Then this is a new day for us, isn't it?
Oh, brother. Yeah. Because that was a fabulous thing for me to be in a studio and be heard but not seen. And a lot of the people I work with today have a similar concern. They're just not comfortable with people staring at them, whether it's on a Zoom screen or in person. And so we need to get comfortable with it because it is part of our world now.
It is part of our world.
Yeah.
I titled this Business Etiquette. And I want to talk a little bit about what this isn't going to be. You are not going to tell people what fork you're supposed to use or pass the salt and pepper. If someone asks you I just was reading this crazy thing. If someone asks you to pass the salt, no, you must pick the salt and pepper up and pass the salt and pepper. Who cares about that? But what concerns me is, as I'm out in the field, and I spend a fair amount of my time out in the field among the realtors, they often talk about how manners is maybe a better word. Manners have gone awry. People don't return calls. People don't, they don't respond to texts. They don't respond on this. They're short on the phone. They yell at each other on the phone. And I'm not talking about client to agent. I'm talking about broker to broker. And because of Zoom, the other thing that's driving all of us insane about Zoom, or driving me, because during COVID all I did was Zoom, is in the beginning they were pretty nice about being on Zoom, and then it just fell apart. I've had people cooking while they're in a Zoom class. I've had people ironing while they're in a Zoom class. I've had people, much more usually, they think I can't see them. So they're looking at me, but I can see what they're really doing is looking at the screen over here and doing whatever work it is. That to me is disrespectful in so many ways. So I think it's, again, we need to talk about how do we bring some of this, I'm an old Montessori girl, this grace and courtesy back to our professional lives as well. I think things have gone awry somewhere with this. So, so that's why I asked you to come and talk to that. How do you do a better Zoom? But that's all just basically etiquette. The speaker has to have some etiquette for that as well, too.
Yes. So my whole basis for this etiquette question is consideration for the other person. And if we keep that frontmost in our mind, then everything flows from that. Mm-hmm. If I'm thinking about me, what am I getting out of this interaction? What are you going to do for me? Then I want to yammer, I want to brag, I want to cut you off, I want to talk more than you do. And it should be the opposite. If we put our focus on the other person, then we listen when they speak, we pause, and it's hard, isn't it? There are people who never take a pause. You probably know some, right?
It's me.
I wasn't going to name names, but...
Truly, it is my secret. What I have to, in my head, say to myself sometimes, not enough, I say, okay, you need a slow count of 5. To me, that seems like eternity, just eternity. But all it is literally 5 seconds. Yeah. That's a really hard skill that I needed to learn, is to sometimes do the slow count of 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is so important. If I were going to pick one thing that everything else cascades from, it would be that consideration for the other person. And we reflect that by listening to what they have to say, really listening with attention. And some of that means we look at people when they're talking. And okay, on a Zoom screen that could be challenging, but when we're in person with people, we focus on them. We're not rummaging in our purse or, for the love of God, ironing or whatever else it might be. Holding them central. I don't mean physically holding them, but holding their thought physically, like really focused, changes everything.
We've been having conversations because there have been some changes in the real estate industry. I've been having some changes about conversations about people having to have deeper conversations with people when they meet them. Okay. And I'll give you an example.
Please.
An example would be, I meet you two and you want to buy a house, so 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a big backyard. So immediately I jump into the MLS and I start looking for 3 bedroom, 2 bath, and a big backyard. I've missed the boat because there are some other questions I should have asked more. For example, that big backyard. Catherine, could you tell me what you want a big backyard for? Mm-hmm. Because maybe it's because you have big dogs. Maybe it's because you want a pool in your backyard. Maybe it's, and I'm so quick to jump to let me tell you about what I have to offer, that I'm not really doing what you just exactly talked about, which is saying, let me listen carefully to what you want. That's, I think, a big skill that we need to learn.
Yes, and a place to practice that is at home or in social engagements. When there's nothing riding on it, I'm not about to make a big sale or lose a big sale, but could I just practice really listening to somebody? Mm-hmm. And listening involves zipping it. And it's hard. And I think my impression, and I'm not a realtor, but my impression of realtors is a lot of people go into that business because you're sociable. You like people. Is that a fair characterization?
That's a fair characterization, yes.
Right? You're extroverts, you're chatty, you're friendly, people like you, and you can use that for your business. But the flip side of that is you want to sometimes be able to tone it down and focus on the other person and really listen to what they're saying. In some ways, introverts have an edge because they don't have that same need to be sharing everything about themselves.
To keep talking,
right?
Yes.
Yeah, and so I encourage people who are more introverted or more quiet to think of themselves as fabulous salespeople, because they often don't think of themselves that way. But what do we want? If I'm buying a house, what do I want from the realtor. Do I want a big sales pitch? No, I want to know that that person understands me, my family, my situation, maybe my business. Maybe that is going to affect the choice of a house. And so to gather all that, the realtor needs to stop talking.
Yes.
And listen.
I like that a lot. Let's just move on for a minute
Okay.
let's do Zoom for a little bit in the middle here.
Sure.
So I'm going to do Zoom things, and both of us have said we're more nervous about being, and I've gotten pretty casual about it because I've done a lot of them.
Yeah.
But the idea of I need to make an impression on a Zoom meeting. I met Carolyn, who's in our office, and we've just hired, or in our audience today, and we just hired her.
Yeah.
Her first meeting with me was on Zoom.
Yep.
And
that's pretty typical now.
It's pretty typical now. So when you're doing a first meeting with someone who is going to be a client, how do I impress them that I'm professional when I'm meeting them via Zoom or FaceTime or any of those kind of things?
All right.
What would be some of the things you would tell me to do?
Here's the first thing. You need to talk through the camera. So my tendency when I'm on Zoom, especially if I'm a little nervous about being on camera and how do I look on video, is to look at the person on the screen. But if I'm looking at your face on the screen, you don't see me looking at you. You see me looking off to the floor. And so I want to talk, this is important, through the camera. People tell me all the time, I can't stand talking to a camera. It's not comfortable talking to a camera. Think about it as through the camera, as if the person you're talking to is right there on the other side. Analogous to a phone. When you call your best friend for a conversation, you don't think of yourself as calling the phone. The phone is just a vehicle that gets your voice to their ears and their voice to your ears. Think of the camera the same way when you're on a Zoom call. You're going through it, not at it or to it, through it, talking to the person right on the other side. How's that for a Zoom tip?
It's a great Zoom tip. I remember you telling all of the people in our leadership stuff, stand to sit up straight. I mean, that seemed like every nun I ever had would come around and touch you on the shoulder or whack you a
That's
little
right,
bit.
I'm just like the nuns.
And say, sit up straight. And but it's helpful to me because especially if you're on a Zoom, you tend to get a little looser because I'm not, like I would never do this if I was in real time, but I will do this. The tendency on Zoom is to do just that.
Yeah. So whether you're on Zoom or in person, you want to be really present in your body. And on a Zoom meeting or Teams or whatever platform people are using, the same thing applies. So you want your feet on the floor, your bottom squarely in your chair, your spine erect, and your shoulders back and down relaxed, and your face pointed toward the camera. So when you get into that posture, everything is more energized. And then you move from there. And, one thing I found on Zoom, often my hands are below the camera level. So it's shooting like from here up. And I need to use my hands to communicate with people. So that means intentionally bringing them into the camera range sometimes. So you have some animation or some movement as you talk.
Do you change the way your voice sounds from when you're in person to when you're on camera?
No, because, you might be a little softer in volume, maybe, because you've got a mic close somewhere, I assume. Like, I use a freestanding mic, and that is just basic equipment tips. If you're doing a lot on Zoom, get yourself a camera and a mic that are not built into your computer, because the quality will be much, much better. So I use a mic, AK something, and it's on a mic stand, it's right here, and it picks up my voice, so I don't need to project very far. Often you'll hear people on Zoom sound like they're shouting because they're inches away from a microphone. They're not, feet away from a live audience. So there's that. What was the question? I find
The
myself
cadence
rambling.
as well. You and as I've been sitting here next to you, I'm thinking about my rate of talking, if they measured it, is probably twice
Fast.
yours.
Yeah.
It's probably twice yours. Is one better than the other, or is it just really kind of, you get what you get?
Can I just say, people of a certain age might remember, I worked for a time with John Landecker, who is a very well-known Chicago DJ, still on the air at WGN. And when I worked with him, it was at a music station. I didn't work with him at WLS, but when he was at WLS, he did an actual feature that was all about talking fast. The whole bit was to try to talk as fast as he could. He is part of the fast talkers of America, like you,
Yes.
right? And it was so interesting when we started working together, the difference in the cadence. I tend to talk more slowly. So I believe that gives my words weight. But slow talk can be boring. So sometimes I need to pick up the pace and match you. The key is the variety, so that sometimes I talk more quickly because it's animated, I'm excited, I'm conveying excitement to our audience, and sometimes I really want what I'm saying to land.
I'll go with that.
And I need to give it a little space. When you're speaking in person or on virtual platforms, the pause is very powerful. And we're often afraid to pause because what if we get interrupted? What if we lose the floor? What if somebody else starts talking? We'll lose their attention. No, you give just a beat for people to take in your message and give it some weight.
I think that vocal variety is a big one, that you have to
It's
be able to
huge.
change who you're. I find even in a one-on-one situation, more of a salesy situation, or even just a personal situation, that as a fast talker, sometimes I have to slow down because the people don't like me anymore because I'm a fast talker, or they don't trust me as much because I'm a fast talker. I need to throttle it back to do that. So I'm kind of alert to, maybe what I'm trying to say is you have to be alert to who you are, and I don't want to say it's mirroring exactly, but it's being courteous, that etiquette thing, to how the other people need to listen to you.
It is a little bit of
Yes.
mirroring.
Yes.
So when I'm with somebody who operates at a faster pace, I'm likely to talk a little faster. And when I'm with somebody who talks more slowly, I would typically talk more slowly. And left to my own devices, like when I'm on stage or in front of a room, then I go for variety. And some of that for me is just natural at this point. Something about that long career in radio.
Yes.
So I
yes.
don't think about it, but the important thing is that it can become natural for you. And it is worth taking note of the responses you get from people when you speak in different ways. And just you learn from that experience what really works with an audience. Can I add one thing to this?
Absolutely.
Because you've noticed, I'm sure, that I am moving my gaze around the room. That's because there are live bodies in the room with us, in addition to you watching on video. And so I take those moments to make contact with everybody in the room. And that's what effective speakers do. When you're talking to a group, even if it's a small group, say it's a family or a couple, you want to make sure you engage everybody in the room, and eye contact is the surest way to do that. For a lot of people, and I'm going to generalize and say especially a lot of young people who spend their life on devices, they're not very comfortable with eye contact. And they'll talk to you with their eyes around looking at the ceiling or looking at the floor or darting around. And you can see how that looks when I do that. You lose some of the connection that you and I might otherwise have. So that is worth practicing, getting really comfortable with eye contact so that you can engage somebody in a room, speak directly to them, and keep their attention. When I'm speaking to a group, people often complain about, well, everybody was on their phones at the back. I don't actually run into that often. And it's because I'm looking at you. And if I'm not looking at you this minute, I'll be looking at you, and you know I'll be looking at you. So are you going to bury yourself in your phone? Probably not. Eye contact is a really excellent way to attract somebody's attention. You know, we use the phrase command attention, and I like to think of it a little softer. I'm not really giving you a command, I'm giving you an invitation to listen carefully to what I'm saying and really take it into consideration for yourself.
I hate to admit this, I always look for the person who is smiling back at me in a large group.
Yeah.
Who is smiling back at me? And I try not to play only to them, but I am ever so grateful for someone who is sitting there smiling at me and nodding their head and responding
Yes.
to me.
And there are people like that who
Yes.
are very expressive,
Yes.
and they are an oasis.
They are for me, yes, for a speaker.
And sometimes you look at a room of people and you're looking at the top of people's heads because they're taking notes or they're on their phone or they're falling asleep or who knows. I take it as a personal challenge to keep looking at people. Even when they're scowling, they look blank or impassive, they're looking away, I still make contact with those people, and you'd be surprised how often they look up. Because people feel it. When you're really connecting, or even making that effort to connect, people feel something. There's an energetic exchange there.
I rarely use PowerPoints in a group.
Tell me why.
Well, for two reasons. One is because when I went to grad school and I was learning all these training things, some professor said to me, and it still echoes to me, they don't need to see it on the screen if they have it in front of them. Why are you giving them to read it in front of them and put it on the screen? I do it now because I know my material so well, but it really is a trick again. I don't want the people in the audience looking at the screen. I want them looking at me. And so it forces me to stay in the game, on task, alive, vocal variety, to do all the things I'm supposed to do. The only time I ever use PowerPoints with any regularity is when we were speaking to a group of like 200 or 300 people, and we were in the audience. You know, we were walking around the audience with the mic.
Yeah.
And at that point, I got to the end of the audience, and I would turn around, or I would speak whatever you were telling me, and I'd be listening and responding to that, or whatever I was doing, and I'd think, I don't know where I am anymore. I don't know where I am in my presentation anymore.
Oh, so
so then I would
PowerPoint.
turn around and say, okay, now I'm back on task. But I think people rely too much on PowerPoints, and PowerPoints are essentially boring.
Yeah.
That's why I don't use them very much.
I think visual aids can be really useful. It would be hard to sell a house without showing somebody a picture of the house. And a lot of pictures, right? The rooms, the yard, the garage, the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So visual aids can really be an important piece of a presentation. In terms of a group presentation where it's projected, whether you use PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever, images are way better than words. The more you have pictures, the better it is. So you could certainly be looking at a picture of a house mm-hmm. and listening to me. You could be looking at a picture of me and listening to me. But I wouldn't want a whole bunch of words up here for you to be reading instead of listening to me. So people who use visual aids effectively can be really dynamic speakers.
It's hard to find them.
Well,
it's hard to find them because mostly what I see is someone who's got 4 bullet points, and they're talking their way through the bullet points, and I think I can hear you. I don't need to. Anyway, I know you do another thing and have another interesting part of your business that you go to companies and you try to help companies teach their executives how to behave. How to behave. How did that? Well, I kind of figure how that happened. But why are companies hiring you to do that? That would be my first question.
Because people have gotten sloppy because of COVID. We were home for 2 years. Everything was on Zoom or Teams or whatever platform. And I think we kind of devolved. I mean, you were speaking about that at the very beginning, right? Mm-hmm. That people have lost the sense of how to have a conversation, how to talk to people. So part of it is that, and part of it is just that as people move up in a company, they confront different kinds of situations, and it can be really useful to have a brush up on how do I present myself. And it's really that people ask me to work on. It's not how people behave, it's not how they frame it, but how do you present yourself? And that doesn't just mean how do you do a presentation. It's talking about executive presence or professional presence or having a more powerful presence. And some of that we've already talked about. It really is about grounding yourself, being in your body, making direct eye contact with an audience, saying what you have to say, and then zipping it.
And I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Oh,
for
great.
this.
That'll be fun.
It'll be fun. Can you give me an example of someone who improved through one of the
Yes.
classes you had?
Yes.
Started bad and got way better?
Yes. It was not in a class. I was
I'm
asked
sorry.
to do individual coaching with this woman who had been promoted and was now going to be part of an executive team on a company that went public. And when they were privately held, there was less riding on everybody's presentation skills. But as a public company, they have shareholders. And meetings are videotaped. And they need to present themselves in a really efficient way. So this particular person had a habit that they were not even aware of jumping in and finishing people's sentences with them. Have you ever known somebody who does that?
Yes, me.
Oh,
Yes, me.
okay. It's annoying as hell.
It's terrible.
And it really gets people upset because they feel cut off. And so when I was asked to coach this person, I said one thing you might want to work on is this habit of jumping in and cutting people off. And she said, I don't do that. I was like, really? No, I don't ever interrupt people. Seriously, she thought she didn't interrupt people. And so I said, close your mouth, lips are closed, and don't open it until I tell you to. And I talked, and she was like, trying to jump in and finish my sentences with me. And it was such a revelation for her. She was like, oh my God, I do that just like my father. Interesting, huh? So that was a way to, in terms of the coaching, to recognize, because we often are unaware of our own habits, right? We don't know what we do with our face or with our hands or with our voice for that matter. And that was a way to bring awareness, and then once that awareness was there, to begin to make a change in it. It was actually not that hard. Close your lips and don't open them until the other person stops talking.
That is so challenging.
Well, it is challenging.
It is challenging.
And in a regular conversation, we do jump in and we might cut people off. Like you and I might get really animated.
And have a great time and
it's fun.
Right.
But that's different from a business meeting where you're trying to say something and I'm parroting the end of every phrase and getting on your last nerve. Is that going to make you want to do business with me? No, it's not. So I need to be conscious of that.
I think that's a fascinating thing you're talking about, because I'm going to end this up by doing a pitch about Toastmasters, because we have a Toastmasters group here at NASBAR, meets once a month, and one of the interesting things, there are a couple interesting things about Toastmasters, but one of the interesting things is every time someone speaks, they have to evaluate their speech. So they have to have an evaluator who would say the same thing. Catherine, you finished every one of people, or the one that they get me on all the time when I speak is you say so too many times. And that's a fast talker thing, because I don't want to have a pause at the end of the period of the sentence. I just want to keep so and keep moving on. I get caught all the time with those. But it is helpful to have someone. The first time that we did this particular Toastmaster, someone said to me, you said so 20 times in 7 minutes.
They counted.
We do. They actually count. Ahs,
Yeah.
all those garbagey words.
Yep.
She said, you said so 20 times. I have not said so 20 times in 7 minutes since then.
Yeah.
But am I purely done with so? No, I'm not done with it. But I've at least managed to recognize that's a bad speech habit and pull back. So I think Toastmasters, for that alone, and to get people to be brave enough and talk in front of a group. And I have to say, our Toastmaster group is phenomenally, this sounds so trendy, but it is just a safe space. people who are you and I who do this for a living, speak for a living, versus people who are terrified to get up. Everybody talks and everybody applauds every time someone talks. No one says, "Oh, you should have done," no. And even the evaluators are so smart that if you were evaluating me, you would have a whole lot to say. You were evaluating someone who shook the whole time that they presented.
You would be gentle.
You would be gentle and just say, and it truly might be, "I'm so proud of you for getting up and speaking," and that's all they needed from that, because that was the biggest deal. It's been remarkable, the stories that I hear from people, the speeches, the improvement that they're seeing. I think every realtor should be doing Toastmasters, because all you do all day long is you present to people. And it's just a great help to be able to do that. So that I'm just going to do a pitch for that. But Catherine, I'm going to thank you so much for coming. I like having you as well as all those leadership guys liked having you as well. I liked it as well. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
The views and opinions expressed by this presenter are theirs. They may not reflect the views of North Shore-Barrington Association of Realtors.